All right, there's lots to unpack here, so let's speak with Daniel Pomerantz, the CEO of the media monitor, Honest Reporting. Hi, Daniel. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you, Lauren.
So after watching the inauguration, it looks like everyone in the U.S. at least, or most of the U.S., is breathing a sigh of relief. But in Israel, the mood might be a little different. It seems like Israelis could be maybe a little bit worried about what Biden's policy regarding Israel might be, regarding Iran. What's going on here? What do you have to say about that?
Well, the leaks that have come out and the statements that have come out so far from the White House seem to be pretty encouraging. Antony Blinken, the incoming Secretary of State, says he wants to pursue his two-state solution, but seems aware of the challenges, saying there's a long way to go before we'll get there. Other leaks have indicated that the Biden administration is going to continue the regional peace approach in terms of the Abraham Accords. And so some of the issues that are most important to Israel, it seems like will continue. One issue that's worrying, perhaps even more to Palestinians, is Mohammed Dalan has been very critical of Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, seems to want to run for his seat, and has been indicating that Biden's support for Abbas could allow the corruption to remain entrenched. And he actually criticizes America for not putting enough pressure on the Palestinian Authority.
Interesting. Do you think that could have, say, an effect on what's going to happen in the upcoming Palestinian elections that we're supposed to have later this year?
Well, I'll go out on a limb and say I don't think it's coincidence that the elections were scheduled after the new president was already chosen in the United States.
Okay, and what about Israeli elections that we're seeing coming up at the end of March? Is there, this inauguration of Biden, the mood in the U.S., the mood in Israel right now, going to affect the outcome, going to affect whether or not Bibi can win this election?
Well, it's always a mistake to make any predictions about Israeli elections.
Of course.
But I'll tell you that Prime Minister Netanyahu has survived a number of different American presidencies, and I would expect that he has plans to survive at least one more.
Let's talk about this F-35 sale that Trump signed just before leaving office. What is his intention with signing this literally moments before leaving the White House?
Well, part of the talks in the Abraham Accords was that F-35s would be part of the deal to sweeten the deal for some of the Arab parties that were engaging. And perhaps the former president was just trying to keep his word to the United Arab Emirates. It raises some concerns among some people who are worried about Israel's qualitative edge, but the F-35 has been out for a few years now, and there are already new innovations to the F-35, some made by Israel, some made by America. So it's not at all clear that the F-35, which the UAE has, is necessarily the equivalent of what America and Israel has.
But Israel has still largely accepted the fact that the UAE now has these jets. They now, have the most advanced military jets in the world, maybe not with all the technology that the U.S. and the Israeli jets have, but it's pretty much up there.
Well, it's part of the regional approach to countering Iran,
right,
that if both Israel, the United States, and the Arab countries that are allies to each have a very capable self-defense, it makes it much more difficult for Iran to take action against any of those allies.
All right, a lot of things happening in the last 24 hours with the U.S. administration. I want to touch on this strange Twitter fiasco that happened with the account of the U.S. ambassador to Israel. So as I said, it briefly changed to say U.S. ambassador to Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. What could be behind that?
Well, Lauren, this is really interesting. I mean, from what we know officially, it was just simply a mistake. Now, the Israeli reaction was of concern. Did we just suddenly recognize statehood for Gaza and the West Bank or something like that? But what really caught me was the Palestinian reaction. The Palestinian Institute for Public Diplomacy reacted by saying, have we been reduced to this? Meaning, has the state of Palestine been reduced to only Gaza and the West Bank? People who know Arabic and who follow the Palestinian Authority know that their official position is that occupied territory means all of Israel, and to compromise is somehow a betrayal of the Palestinian cause. We hear that often in Arabic, very rarely in English. My suggestion is that the White House and the news media should listen up and take this to account.
So who could potentially be behind this? Who has the password for that Twitter account?
Well, it could be any number of people. It could be anyone from a technical person to an incoming young diplomat who thinks they know what they're doing and doesn't realize all the ramifications. But it's very interesting that this has revealed both concerns on the Israeli side and also a Palestinian position that we don't often hear about publicly.
Perhaps a small intern somewhere starting a huge international diplomatic row. Daniel Pomerantz, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.